Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to our Improving Talks webinar. We are very happy and glad to have you here today for our second session of the week. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we continue our awesome Tomorrow Technology Today Improving Talks 12-part series designed to communicate to our clients, employees, and all of our stakeholders on Improving's point of view and capabilities. My name is Armando Lopez-Reed, and I am thrilled to welcome you today. Now, I want to talk a little bit about today's speaker, Preston Mesarve. He's a technical director in the data services practice at Improving. With over 20 years of experience working with data, Preston brings a wealth of knowledge in data development, engineering, integration, architecture implementation, and analytics. His deep-rooted passion for data is evident not only in his professional work, but also through his active involvement in the local data community and presenting at industry conferences. I am very honored to welcome him today with his webinar, Empowering Your Data State, Modern Practices for Data Quality. Before we start, I encourage you to use our Q&A feature so you can ask him questions, which I will make sure to get to him. And now I leave you with Preston Mesarve. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, Armando. Much appreciated. And thank you all for joining this conversation. This should be a fun, engaging talk. Today, we're going to be part of the Tomorrow Technology Today series that's going to cover a lot of scenarios and areas where we can modernize and enhance our environments and our estates to make sure that they are at scale. We've had some really great conversations previously since the beginning of October. Items like how to tell if your data platform is actually modern, talking about AI, talking about real-time data. All of those videos are available at that website. So if you go to our improving.com website, click on Thoughts and Webinars, you can see all of those past talks. Today's session, we're going to be talking about data quality. What is the impact of poor data quality? What does great data quality look like? And the technology that kind of helps us get there. We'll close out with some final thoughts, but like Armando said, please utilize the Q&A feature if you do have any questions. The goal of this talk is to be thought-provoking. I want you all to have ideas on how you can engage within your organization to start promoting good data quality practices. So let's start with impact. If we think of data quality, we've always kind of got that knee-jerk reaction to, oh, the data on the report isn't correct, or what this specific data point got sent out to a client and now there's client complaints. But we never really think about, as technical professionals, what is the actual business cost of that? And that's actually a hard measure to really calculate. Luckily, Forrester, one of the research companies, has done some deep-rooted analysis to find out if they can attach a dollar figure to what poor data quality can cost a business. So this research study done not too long ago in 2023, they estimated a pretty decent range here of $5 million to upwards of $25 million for an organization that it actually costs them annually for poor data quality. That's pretty shocking. That's really eye-opening if you think about it. Another study done by the folks over at Gartner, they put that number at $13 million. So we're not talking about small amounts of money. We're not talking about inconsequential areas of poor data quality on reports and things like that. Our talk today is going to really think about data quality in a holistic sense. If we think about that, what are the drivers that could cost the business due to poor data quality? Well, I think as technical professionals, we've always had the scenario in our past where we've dealt with bad data, and we all know how inefficient it can be. So really taking a velocity hit to your operational efficiency is one business cost driver. Teams don't move as fast if they have to pause, clean data, and move forward, or do initial analysis to make sure that their decisions are correct based on the data that they're presented. Those cleansing costs could be a small effort, or they could be a whole project-wide effort to where, hey, we really need to take stock of our data estate and introduce some cleansing mechanisms to make sure that we're really going forward with the right amount of data. One big cost measure is we don't really it's hard to put a tangible number on it, but how much money does it cost a business if they're not able to make opportune decisions? They're not able to take advantages of certain things in the marketplace because their data points don't really allow them to give them that vision. that alone could be a huge cost indicator. Companies that are under regulation or under compliance, well, naturally they have to have certain data quality practices in place. If not, then they experience fines and expenses and things like that. That's a hard, tangible cost. So things like that are pretty obvious on what it would cost. Or data kind of muddies the water for fraud and security risk. So there's a cost there of how much appetite of risk an organization is willing to undertake to introduce that into their organization. Another thing is brand management. When we think of customer interaction, a company that sends you a piece of information that maybe not be relevant, or maybe you're dealing with a customer over the phone and you're trying to get your account situated, and they're providing you data that doesn't really match reality. So what do you think of that business? So brand recognition plays a part into that. But ultimately, what we really want to talk about is we want to talk about trust. They really can't put a price on that. They like the old adage says, it takes a very long time to establish trust, but not a whole lot of time to lose it. So one thing we want to do when we're talking about data quality is we want to make sure that we're working in an area of trust. The data that we're supporting the business with, we don't want them to start questioning the data every time a new report comes out. We want everything to be cohesive. If we can establish trust through data quality measures, then that makes everything a lot easier to run. Let's take a look at real life scenarios here. Now, this is an unfortunate event. This happened just recently in the news. Unfortunately, Equifax experienced a data quality issue where they had inaccurate credit scores. Downstream, that affected millions of customers. So when they start reporting out improper credit scores, that affected things like loan applications being denied, higher interest rates, things like that. A really interesting thing about their public statement for this issue right here was they did mention it's like, hey, we are going to take action on this by start modernizing our tools to help catch this stuff in the future. Data is a lot. Data is everywhere. So you've got to make sure that you've got the tools to be able to scale to help you when you start accumulating at mass. A really weird news point. It seems to happen a lot. I've got two different news stories here with the same outcome. Somebody's house gets scheduled for demolition. How does that even happen? Is that just a poor business practice where the data that they're reviewing isn't analyzed or validated or reconciled? Is there data, are they using GIS data that maybe isn't enhanced with imagery so they can't really make those decisions? What does that look like as a business practice? Are we not validating the data before we act upon it? This is a huge impact. These poor people, they've had their homes completely demolished. So this stuff does happen. Data quality issues are real. Let's take a look at this. How do we get here? What causes a company or organization to really have a rating of poor data quality? Well, things you can look at as, well, maybe it's just not prioritized. It's not an important action item for our business. We'll worry about data quality later. Well, that's one reason to get poor data quality. If you're not managing it, it will grow unwildly. So another option here is moving too fast. Maybe we're in a position where the business dictates that our growth doesn't really have data quality as a strategy right now because we're moving into feature fast development. Or maybe we're doing an M&A example where we're doing frequent acquisitions, and a lot of the data from our competitors or other companies that we're trying to acquire, maybe it just doesn't dovetail nicely into our data models, or maybe their business is designed a different way that it's hard to model data upon acquisition to do those migrations. Things like that really challenge the area of data quality. On a softer side, using just management skills here, if your management teams aren't talking amongst each other within different departments, that creates silos. So take, for example, if you've got a sales team that has a specific status that they monitor within their department, but it's also tangentially related to maybe the finance group, but they've got like a different definition of those statuses. That's a mismatch. So communication is key here. If we're working in silos, anticipate that there's going to be differences here if not everybody's on the same page. Another aspect of how a company or a business can have poor data quality is just they're just not investing in the right tools. Maybe everything that they do is to a point where they just want to kind of roll their own data quality tests, and that's fine unless you start scaling to a point where your resources don't allow you to. Another big one here is training. Maybe we just don't know that the items that we're doing in our workflow, the business practices that we're doing, we don't know that our actions are creating poor data quality. Might be a scenario of, hey, I'm doing it this way because this is the way we've always done it. Well, if we don't improve our processes based on things downstream, that also could be an indicator of poor data quality. So let's talk about growth for a second.
Preston, I have a question here for you before we move on. Speaking of the business cost, which you talked about at the beginning of your presentation, was really eye-opening. I'm still processing it. How would one start to estimate the cost to their business due to poor data quality issues? My company is on the smaller side, so the started averages from the studies wouldn't resonate with my boss.
Okay, yeah, sure. That's a great question. Thanks for taking that one. So yeah, there's a lot of small companies where maybe their revenue is only 5 million. So if you go up to your boss and say, hey, businesses on average cost $5 million a year in data quality issues, you've really got to kind of right size that to your scenario and your situation. So a really important thing to do here when we're taking on data quality initiatives is really taking stock at where that time is spent. So some important things to do for assessing data quality and what it could cost your company. Start doing postmortems regularly on projects. If you're experiencing projects that really come down to speed bumps and time blocks because you're dealing with poor quality data, the amount of time spent that can be tracked to real hours and real cost because employees are actually spending resource time to fix those problems. Some of the things that are harder to calculate are things like brand recognition and stuff like that. So if you're a data practitioner or a technology professional or just in the business that really wants to enable a good data practice across the organization, one thing that I would do is reach out to every department and say, hey, where are your pain points when it comes to data? When you get a report, do you trust it? If that answer is no, well, that's a cost because now we're questioning the data that we're using for reports that we're utilizing to drive the business. Customer surveys, that's another good one. So ask around, take surveys. It's really one of those things you want to take a step back with a high level overview and really see where data quality issues can arise. I've got some slides later on that'll kind of paint a picture as to where to look for that kind of stuff. But yeah, great question, Armando. Thanks for fielding it. That really shows that data quality isn't just literal data being inaccurate. It can evolve to other areas.
Yeah, totally agree, Preston. Thank you for sharing those best practices with us.
Thank you. All right, so a couple of weeks ago, during our Tomorrow Technology Today series, Rich McCraw had a presentation called How to Tell If Your Data Platform is Actually Modern. Great presentation, highly recommend going to see that because he gives a lot of points. And one of my favorite slides and one of my favorite takeaways out of that was this data maturity step ladder. Here we've got 4 different levels of maturity that an organization can attribute themselves to and where they are in a data maturation process. So for example, on the very low end side, if we're just starting an initiative on becoming modern, we've got data neutral. Data does not play a role in business operations. Whereas if we look at the far right, this is more of a very evolved, very mature organization where data drives the strategy. These are your AI readiness companies. These are companies that are ready to take their data to the next level and can use it for really accurate forecasting and training AI models and more. So we've got 2 ends of the spectrum and then a couple points in between. So this is an important exercise to kind of assess where your organization is in the data maturity life cycle. But what this chart specifically doesn't say is what are some of the data quality practices that each one of these steps would take to be considered neutral, aware, critical, or driven. So in the next couple slides, I want to kind of dive into this a little deeper and take a look at some practices or maybe lack of practices that some of these organizations would or would not do. So let's start with a data neutral company. Uh, this is a company where data doesn't play a super critical role in business operations. Um, Typically, any data quality is very reactive. There's not really a quality focus on the data. We just need to get the data to a place to serve its next purpose. Any cleaning is all ad hoc. So if a report is off or if something's off on the system, it's an individual, hey, step-by-step request, let's go fix it. It's a very manual process. There's no automation here. And unfortunately, in terms of data quality, there's really not a policy or a playbook set up. It's very knee-jerk reaction, very firefighting mode a lot of times. If a data neutral company starts growing really fast and the workload starts to increase, this is a proverbial data quality whack-a-mole. It seems like that you're always fighting a fire to put out these little data quality fires. So look into that as well. Make sure that you've got policies that kind of gets you into a state of maturity if you're at this spot. One important note here is the fact that there's no real ownership of who owns what in the data estate or the data universe. The longest joke for the longest time is who's the DBA? Well, it's the person sitting next to the SQL server, whoever's sitting closest to the data. And a lot of data ownership, unfortunately, kind of feels that way in some very new and growing companies. They haven't really defined those roles yet as to who's doing what with the data. The next step being a data aware, this is a little bit more of a mature process. They might have a limited informal governance process set up where they've got members that actually meet and discuss things about, hey, what policies do we need to take when X, Y, or Z happens with a data quality issue? Maybe we do have some basic data validation points going in. So think of a finance company would obviously have something here for reconciliation. Another scenario here is we might actually have people designated to do this work. So we've got business analysts, we've got people that know the business, how the data interoperates with that business, and can be able to massage that data so that it is in that clean, pristine state. Unfortunately, here, we're not talking about extravagant toolage. We've got very minimal tool usage here. Maybe a lot of it is just simply Excel, SQL, maybe some Python, but with Excel and SQL, we all know in the data space that you can get a lot done with just those two tools. So that's what a data aware company would look like. And as we start moving forward in the evolution here, we start getting more and more into a formal process here. So with a data critical company, now we've got a very proactive governance framework. We've got people that actually are discussing these policies. We have people in place. Data is defined. We've got things like a data dictionary. We've got standards. We've got protocols. So if something happens, if something breaks, we've got playbooks to know exactly who's doing what and what is being done, and possibly even an SLA as to the ETA of getting that fixed. This is also a scenario where we're introducing something called data quality KPIs. KPIs are great for all areas of business. Let's treat our data the same way. It tells us what the health of our data quality is at any given time so that we can see, is our data complete? Are we missing records? What errors happened in our data pipelines? All of that kind of rolls up into not only the health, like a health check of your data, but this will also articulate, hey, this is immediate action that needs to take place so that we can stay operational. These are companies that utilize this via the proper tools. And also with that governance framework in place, we also have a method of training and awareness. We're communicating that data is critical and that we want to proceed in the utmost data quality processes as possible. If you see bad data quality, say something so that we can remediate it. Now, the last step, the full maturity here, this is kind of like the data utopia, if you will. This is advanced data governance. These are the AI readiness companies. This is the companies that are taking data very seriously because it is in their interest to do so. These are the companies that have figured out data monetization.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. Yes.
We have another question for you. They keep coming.
Yeah.
So what are common roadblocks, pitfalls as companies increase their data maturity? That's a good one.
It's scale. That's a great question. So it's taken it to that next level. So once you scale from taking something and like say maybe a traditional framework of we'll call it analytics framework where we've got maybe like a data warehouse that's got some ETL into it and it's serving up Power BI reports. Maybe our reconciliation and our data quality audits, maybe those were all hand rolled. Maybe those were all ad hoc queries that were just run at ad hoc times. Maybe they weren't scheduled. They weren't really automated. The next step of that is adopting the tooling there so that we can take it to the next level at scale and not have to rely on somebody checking the data. We want to make it more of a proactive stance versus a reactive stance. If we can tell that there's data quality issues before our customers even know about them and we can start taking action, that's a whole lot better communication story when we talk to our customers to say, hey, it's 9 a.m. I know you're expecting the sales report. We noticed overnight there was a load. We're rerunning it. The report will be at 9:15. That's a much better story and experience downstream for your customers than the customers telling you at 9:30, I've been trying to run my report for 15 minutes and it's broken. What's going on? So it's being in front of those issues. Yeah, so this kind of paints the picture of the data quality maturity. I implore you to ask yourself, where do you guys sit with this? Where is your organization? Do you have options to grow? Are you having this conversation with your leadership? So those are all important questions to ask. All right. So let's continue on. Let's continue forward here. So how do we get there? We've looked at areas of how we got here, but how do we get there? What does our growth strategy look like? Do we have a growth plan? And this is an important conversation. So the biggest thing is that culture is a component of your data strategy. Hopefully we have a data strategy. But more importantly, if we're talking in the parlance of data quality, hopefully we are looking at culture to really build out that data quality. It really can't be a single person. It can't be a very passionate business analyst that is driving the influence for an entire organization. This is where it is really critical in order to get ahead of data quality in a good positive sense. Leadership has to be bought in. This has to be a leadership priority from the top. Because what is going to need to happen is influence is going to need to trickle down to each department so that we can scale within data quality from a department level so that everybody is bought in and they own their data. That's kind of the shift right now that you see in IT anyway. Businesses just can't scale if IT or business analysts are owning 100% of all data quality issues and data ingestion issues. It's pivoting now to domain ownership of data. The sales data is responsible for providing clean data, defined data. And how do we do that? How do we get everybody together and on the same page? Well, it's part of the culture, and we'll continue to talk about that. The good news is this is not anything new. This has been done before. If we look at history's greatest hits for quality, we'll see companies like Toyota, who is probably the best example of this. They had an approach called Kaizen, which is a quality scenario where you break down problems and build them back together so that you understand the pain points that were done for either a malformity or a manufacturing issue. And it's just that entire approach across the board that really made a historic positive story for Toyota. Another one, I think in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s was GE. GE is an extreme culture of quality. With the whole Six Sigma approach, quality was just an extreme focus. So this is nothing new. We're not rebuilding the wheel. These stories have already taken place. We're following that same vein, but adding the technology aspect into it. So speaking of not rebuilding the wheel, what does that wheel look like? This is the formal data governance wheel. The Data Management Association International has this thing called the DAMA wheel, which is the data governance and all of its spokes or all of its dependencies here. All of these items kind of wrap around what data governance is. So that's a good question. What is data governance? Uh, it's different things for different businesses. That's for sure. A small retail sales startup company is not going to have the same data governance structure that, say, a billion-dollar bank or a hospital would have. They're two different businesses. So I say all that to say that the structure of data governance is going to be right-sized with your maturity of the business and your appetite for data quality. So one thing that I like to articulate here when you're setting up new formal data governance is start small. Start identifying where your pain points are and let's address them at that level. We're not trying to boil the ocean. So the term data governance light is always used in a popular sense for companies that are starting off. That will allow people to kind of ease into a more formal data governance approach to where they start including the entire business. But start small. Identify your pain points, whether that's lack of definitions. That's a perfect scenario to get everybody on the same page to say, hey, sales, hey, marketing, how do you guys define customer acquisition cost? What is your definition to make that measure, make that metric? This is that way to do that. And it's done in a very global overarching scale so that everybody's speaking the same language. So this is its own talk in and of itself. We're not scoped to talk about the intricacies of data governance, but it is a very important concept to start controlling a lot of the data.
Preston, Chandan Dura asks, in a reporting environment, what we included is the information like when it was last loaded timestamp in every report. This helped the viewer client to know if the report is stale because of ETL failure or just the data did not change overnight.
Yeah, so the difference between a good question and a great question is a great question sets us up for the next few slides. So yeah, that's a concept of data transparency, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it goes under the observability foundation, which we'll talk about here next. But yeah, great question. We'll definitely get to that. Finishing up on setting up that initial data governance. When we're starting small, we want to take off some bite-sized chunks here. What is it that we're initially trying to achieve with our first round of data governance? Well, first thing is just creating the ownership. Let's get people to start buying in and owning their data. The sales team they're now responsible for their inputs of data. The finance department is now responsible for the way they define certain measures, and it gets people bought in. We're not just pushing all of this to the IT department to figure out. Another initial goal here for a governance light setup would be, let's start setting up some initial policies. So if a pipeline breaks, and to Chandan's question right there, the reports aren't getting updated. What is the next step of action? Well, the governance is going to work with the business stakeholders, and we're going to create a workflow so that this is succinctly and efficiently remediated as soon as possible. So it gives us some SLAs, it gives us who's doing it, what it is they're actually doing, and how long it takes them to do it. So the policies and playbooks, that's a pretty key measure because if we have that, that means nobody's scrambling and trying to relearn the wheel with every data quality issue that comes down the pipe. Another thing here is roles, things like data stewards, people that want to help clean up the data. Assigning those people to do that and giving them the autonomy to do that work. That's a huge effort right there. And if the governance scenario, if the government's organization can assign that, that's great strides into getting to good data quality. We've already talked about definitions, getting the departments aligned. But most importantly is cadence. This is not a once and done meeting. This should be part of the culture, like I said. So let's meet quarterly, maybe monthly if we have to. It depends on what the business looks like. But definitely meet regularly and continue to have these conversations because the more data we start consuming, the more questions and issues that we'll need to address on a governance level to make sure that we've got the right definitions and the right policies and the right components in place to serve up the data as needed, as expected. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. Now, this is a good thought exercise. If everybody's capable now of taking a note, please do, because I want this to be a thought-provoking set of conversation slides here. I want you to think about each one of these items and where you might have pain points in your organization. As we go through each one of these, I'm going to give some examples of things that could fall within these different components here of what I consider data quality foundations. So let's start with accessibility here. This means that data is available. You can easily retrieve it. It's integrated into the business processes, and it's got line to line. It's end to end. It can serve up as a source, and it can make it to its destination. Well, this could be anything. This could be just a normal source system internally. This could be third-party data that's accessible. Maybe you have to reach out via an API. But if that third party has a failure, do we know about it? Is it surfaced? Do we have those errors risen to a point where we can take action on it? So those are all questions to have. This is a great set of foundations here to add to certain KPIs. As you go through your own data scenario and your own data environment, take a look at these. Each one of these, you could probably set up some measures to create the health of your data quality based on these items right here. Accessibility, I also want to throw in another scenario here. It's not just connectivity. Reference data is another big one here that a lot of people don't think about. So we've all seen data that's hidden away in a spreadsheet, hidden away in a Teams channel somewhere, or worse, maybe it's a single employee that's been working for the company for 35 years, and they know every status code, every definition, and it's not written down anywhere. It's just within their head. And if they go on vacation, I hope you don't need anything. Stuff like that. That's considered reference data, and if that's not accessible to anybody who needs it, that would be a poor score. So think about accessibility. Do you have data in your estate that is easily accessible or hardly accessible? And then ask those questions, why? The next one here is accuracy. The data value accurately reflects the real world objects or events that the data is intended to model. So things like, think retail. When you check your stock online and it says, oh, we've got 10 of those items in stock. But then when you get to the store, oh, sorry, we sold out of that a long time ago. We don't have any. Well, that's bad data quality. That's when inventory is not getting updated. That is an accuracy issue. For example, miscalculations would be an accuracy issue too. Let's just say that a new project wrapped up and it interjected some new code into the code base, and unfortunately, one of the calculations that it did miscalculated a value because of a logic error. Well, the producible assets of that stored procedure or whatever it is, unfortunately, that's now an accuracy pain point because we now need to go back and remediate that. So that's also something to consider. I also consider dependency data too, part of this. If you've got incorrect dependency data, that can skew accuracy. Another one of history's unfortunate greatest events here for data quality, NASA lost a mission back in, I think it's 25 years ago, back in the late 90s. There was a scenario where the Mars, one of their Mars missions had a scenario where they were calculating, it was a metric versus imperial units snafu, where it just, they inputted the wrong unit of measure, and it miscalculated a trajectory point or something like that, and it lost the orbiter. So that's unfortunate. That's an expensive mistake. So think about accuracy. Or do you have any data accuracy issues in your organization, and what is the root cause of that? Completeness. This is where you're not seeing the full story of all of your data sets. So records, not necessarily records are missing, but fields are not completely intact, or maybe there's a lot of null values where there shouldn't be. Customer profiles, perfect example. So if we're missing key address information, like let's just say we're missing 140 some cities out of our addresses, that might not paint a good picture if you're the marketing department to say, hey, I've got to send out all of our customers some information on our new sales adventure, but we have no real accurate mailing information because our cities are blank. That's a completeness issue. Another example here, I think we've all seen this when we're shopping for products online. You'll see one company has extremely detailed product information for a specific SKU, but yet you go to another website from another company, look at the exact same product, and it's missing something like size or the color of the product or something like that. That's a completeness concern. So think about that in terms of your data organization. When you're looking at your domain data, what is a complete sales picture? What does a complete financial picture look like? All of those items are very good items to discuss. Go into consistency. This is data that exists in multiple locations, but it's used for like multiple systems. Like take for example, we have like a customer onboarding system as well as some marketing app. But for some reason, in both systems, the addresses are different or unsynced. So when we have a consistency issue, that means the exact same data isn't in this exact same state that it needs to be. And which one do you use as the single version of the truth? That's going to be a data governance question. Precision. Is it recorded with the utmost precise values that you're looking for? So things like rounding errors. I think Office Space is a great example here. That movie from the late 90s had a great precision error in their code. Maybe it's a scenario where it's just no system constraints on a manual entry screen for a system. For example, if you're entering in quantity of items and somebody just has the ability to enter in 10,000 when that will never, ever happen. Things like that, that's a precision issue that can skew results. So take a look at that as well. Are there any areas that are impacted by that? Relevancy, that's a fun one. Take, for example, you've got outdated data in your system and it just isn't relevant anymore, but yet it's being used. For example, would a 30-year-old be getting a whole lot of college mailers for, hey, enroll now, rush week, or whatever that is? Things like that. You want to make sure that your data is up to date and relevant. Another example, probably a more impacting example here would be patient data that doesn't have current medications or current treatments. That would impact your patient care. So if it's not relevant, it's not relevant to the amount of business decision or medical decision that needs to take place at that point. That's a huge concern. Kind of related there is timeliness. This goes back to the question that was raised earlier. Data is updated with sufficient frequency, so it meets the business requirements. So yes, reports, being transparent on the report to say, hey, this report is updated as of this latest date. You are getting timely information. Or it could be an unfortunate scenario where systems have certain statuses that just aren't getting updated. So take, for example, if you order a package and you just don't know when it's going to arrive because they never do the point-and-point contact information on where that package is. So the status update of your package and your delivery just isn't ever updated. It's hard to tell what time that package will arrive. Grain is a big one. I see this a lot. Being able to provide data at the grain that you need it. And what I mean by that is at the level that you need that data. So take, for example, a very common scenario here is, say you've got sales data, but it's sales data by salesperson. And the analysis that you need to do on this data is you need to see the sales information by not only salesperson, but a lower grain of data. You need to see the individual detailed line items of each sale. If you needed to run analytics at that low grain level, you can't work with that highly aggregated set of data. So making sure that your data is of the valid grain is a very important concept here as well. And then just validity, valid data. Take, for example, Social Security numbers. Are they full character lengths? Do you have account numbers that need to start with a certain prefix? If that's just erroneous, when you start to do lookups on that data is going to fall out and it's just no longer valid. Email address is a perfect example. If it doesn't end in a valid domain name, that's an invalid email address. So things like that would start having validity issues with your data quality. And then we get down to talking to observability. This is a big concept. This is the overarching concept here. So this is everything. This is line of sight for all of your data. Think about like old war movies when all the generals are looking at this big map to kind of see a very high level overview. That's what this is with observability with data. We want to see the health of our data at a large overview scale. How many jobs are failing? What are our timeliness errors that we're getting with our data tests? Stuff like that. So that creates observability, and that's going to, over time, get better and better as we start building out what is needed to start making sure that each one of these foundational items are met with the expected result. So before we get into technology, I know I did a lot of talking there. Armando, any questions to come up?
We do have another one. Really interesting questions from the audience. It says, is a data steward a typically new hire in terms of skill set, or is that a role existing staff can fill? That's a good one.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay. So answer is if you're starting out, typically no. Typically no, you'd want somebody with the existing business knowledge that knows the business to do the data stewardship work. Um, but as you grow, yes, you will want that as a resource because a valuable BA that knows everything about the business, you're not going to want them doing data cleanup work for a long period of time. I think the key takeaway for that question, though, it's very important. It's very vital. This goes back to our culture scenario of why leadership needs to be bought in, because the people that have those roles within data quality, there needs to be enough resource allotted for that workload to even happen. If we just tack it on like, hey, this is just something else you've got to do, try to work it in with your schedule, it will fall off. It will not get prioritized. We've got to dedicate capacity to be able to do this work and at a timely amount of time in order for them to do it. Otherwise, like I said, it just doesn't get prioritized. Great question. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk technology here. Let's take a look at a data platform. Data platforms, yours may look like this. It may look way more complex. This is just a very simple data platform, but the point I want to try to make is with this is when you look at your data platform, take a look at it. Where in this flowchart of data movement, where do you see data quality actions occurring? Where can you put in audits? What needs to be audited? The question earlier about putting the timestamps on reports, well, that would be at the very far right here where Power BI is used. So absolutely, be transparent on your reports. Show that your audience that you are trusting, that you have a trusted approach with your data so that eventually they will trust the data. Another scenario here is reconciliation over the medallion architecture. I've seen that be a good concept so that the data that we're transforming along the business layers, make sure that they are as expected. Maybe we're looking for outliers, maybe bad data upon ingestion. A plethora of things that can be done here. This is a very easy, simple example. This is a more robust example. Your mileage might vary. The more components you have, obviously give you the opportunity to add more technology to solve these problems. But what are those technologies? What are those tools? So let's take a look at that. The concept of master data management has been around for a while. It's not new. It is basically consolidating your data so that we have a single golden record, if you will. So think addresses here. 123 Main Street could be the same record as 123 Main ST period. Which one is right? Which one does the business wish to use? So that is the concept of master data management. And if we look at our foundations, what are the components of the foundations that master data management helps facilitate, helps solve? Well, all of these mostly, except for precision and timeliness, it allows you accessibility because remember we're talking about reference data here. Reference data is a perfect thing to put in master data management so it can be accessible downstream. But it allows you to clean data. It allows data to come in and ingest and then have a staging scenario to where it can be cleaned. That helps with observability. A business can say, hey, how much new data do we have that hasn't been vetted out yet? This is where this can help in that layer. So look into master data management. If you've got multiple data points that are hard to align to a single data point, master data management is your helper there. Some of the players in that space, Informatica, Prophecy, TIBCO, these are all huge companies that have been around for a while. One thing to note when you're choosing tools like this is look at the whole feature set. A lot of these tools package up platforms that do a lot more than just one thing. So when we talk about tool adoption and tool assessment, you really want to make sure that you've got your own ducks in a row, so to speak, so that you know what you're trying to solve. Do we want a data governance software package? Do we need specifically just master data management, or do we want something that can handle maybe a flavor of both, or maybe something extra with it also includes data quality? All those things to really assess before we start looking at the right tools is you want to make sure that you want to find the right balance for the right tool for the right job. Data testing and validation. This is pretty much covers all your bases here. This is writing test cases, making sure that you're doing reconciliations, and you can do this with a plethora of tools. You can use regular SQL, you can use Python, you can roll your own solution, so to speak, and place it in your tech stack where you see fit to calculate KPIs to make sure that you're doing the foundational components of all of these. You can do individual test cases to make sure that each of these areas are being met as needed. So some players in this field, DBT, wildly popular in the last 5 years or so. This is a great tool that has their own test case ability, very proactive. You can write your own test cases in SQL. Companies like Validator also do testing and validation. Check into these companies too. They also have profilers that can go out and say, hey, your data looks like this, but we see these outliers. Is this something that you need to take a look at? That's a very helpful approach to things. Also, data cataloging, which kind of does the same thing, goes out, searches your data, tells you what data exists in your environment, maybe how it's utilized, perhaps even collecting metadata about that data, which could be important to you. These are the major players in those areas that also have made bigger platforms that do just more than data discovery and cataloging. Coming up with data observability, things like Microsoft Purview, Monte Carlo, this provides that lineage aspect so you can get that high level overview. These are services that scan your estate, attached to your objects so you can see when things were used, how they're used, what's tying things together, and it just gives you that kind of overall view. There's no one single tool to help all companies. You really have to look at these and see which feature sets match your use cases and your pain points, and kind of go from there. All right, so we've talked a lot here. Let's go through some closing thoughts. I hope you were able to get some good takeaways from this. I hope it was thought provoking. And what are your next steps? Be an advocate, be that evangelist in your organization that really wants to champion data quality. Make sure that you're having these conversations with the people that matter, the people that can influence and that can really provide change within an organization. That's going to kickstart this whole effort for you. We need to treat data as an asset. That's huge. So data is an asset. Data is everywhere. We already have tight controls for things like our financials. We just need to treat our data like the exact same. Let's treat it with respect and make sure that it's got the nice controls for the utmost data quality that we have available to it. And then lastly, let's start creating that culture of data trust. Let's do training. Let's do learning. Let's start having conversations on when we see data quality issues, what it could impact downstream, and how do we remediate that? So having those conversations, getting that ball rolling, really starts turning your organization from something where you are today, hopefully, to something more mature. That was a lot to discuss in an hour, I know, but let's continue the conversation. This is a way to get in touch with improving and myself. If your organization has these challenges and you're really not kind of sure how to address them, maybe you need something like a data quality assessment or maybe a tool assessment, or you need to talk to somebody to look at a project to really get your data quality in ship shape, give us a call. We are data professionals. We're passionate about this stuff. We love talking about it. So here's our contact information for later. Also, it continues. We have several seminars or several webinars coming up later on too through the end of the month, I believe. So go to our improving website, thoughts, and then webinars. And the next one's coming up. We got 4 good ones here for the rest of the month of November. AI with Kevin Jourdain. That's you can't miss that one. That's going to be highly engaging. I know Kevin personally. He is extremely passionate about AI and really looking forward to that one. But all of these are on our website, so absolutely check the recordings if you have missed one. But hopefully we'll see you there at the next webinar. Thanks, Armando. I appreciate it.
Preston, what a great session. Very, very interesting stuff. And you got to answer all the questions that our audience had. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, but especially you, Preston, for your time and preparation. And as he said, coming up this Friday, make sure to join Sean Antonello as he continues with our Tomorrow Technology Today series with his webinar, Achieving Self-Service and Data Independence in a SAP World. You don't want to miss it. Until next time, everyone, have a great rest of your day.